October 10th, 2014, from Oriole Park in Camden Yards in Baltimore, Maryland. It was game one of the ALCS between the Kansas City Royals and the Baltimore Orioles. And on the mound for the O's, it was Chris Tillman. And on the mound for the Royals, it was big game James Shields. So starting off in the top of the first, Tillman got the first two Royals to go down, but then Cain reached base. But then Tillman got Hosmer to strike out to end the top of the first. So now moving on to the bottom of the first, and Shields set down the O's in order. So after one, it was still knotted up at a goose egg. Now in the top of the second, Billy Butler would get a leadoff single, and then Tillman would set down the next three batters as he struck out Alex Gordon, then got Perez and Infante out, and that would bring us to the bottom of the second, and Nelson Cruz would lead off the bottom half of the inning off with the leadoff single, just as Butler had done in the top half of the inning. But then Pierce ended up out, so now Hardy came up to bat, and he got a single, so now he had 2 on, 1 out. Flaherty then struck out, so then Hundley came to the plate, and he ended up reaching on an infield single, so now he had the bases juiced with 2 out, and then Schoop ended up popping out, so that would bring us to the third inning. So after 2, it would still be 0-0, although in the bottom of the second, the O's got 3 hits. So now in the top of the third, Moustakas would ground out, and then the second bat of the inning was Escobar, and Alcides Escobar hit a home run as he ended up putting the first run on the board for this game as the Royals took the 1-0 lead. So Tillman let off that home run with 1 out, and then Aoki came up and he got a single, and then Cain walked. So the Royals had a rally going now as they had 2 runners on and 1 out. Hosmer came to bat and he struck out, so that brought up Billy Butler now with 2 runners on and 2 out, and he hit an infield single to load the bases. So now the bases were juiced for Alex Gordon, and Alex Gordon hit a double that brought all the runners in as he cleared the bases, and now it was 4-0 Royals over the O's, and Gordon ended up reaching third base on an error by Schoop. So now we had Gordon on third base 90 feet away from scoring, and Perez came up, but he ended up popping out, and that would bring the top of the third to a close. So at this point, it was 4-0 Royals over the O's. So now Shields was on the mound for the Royals to face Markakis, and Markakis got a leadoff double for the Orioles. Now Diazza came up to bat. He ended up getting out, but he moved Markakis over to third with the grounder. So now Adam Jones came up with 1 on and 1 out, with Markakis on third just 90 feet away from scoring, and Jones hit a single that brought Markakis in as the Orioles scored their first run of the game, and it was now 4-1 Royals over the Orioles. Nelson Cruz and Pierce then both got out, and that would bring the third to a close, but not after both teams had scored, as the Royals put up 4 in the top of the third, and the O's put up 1 in the bottom of the third, so it was now 4-1 Kansas City over Baltimore heading to the top of the fourth. Omar Infante would walk to lead off the inning, but then Tillman set down the next 3 batters in order as he got Moustakas, Escobar, and Aoki out, and we were headed to the bottom of the fourth. Shields beat the first batter, Hardy, to pop out, and then Flaherty got a single, but then Shields struck out Hundley, and Schoop ended up grounding out into a fielder's choice, and that would bring the fourth inning to a close as it was still 4-1 KC over Baltimore. So now in the top of the fifth, Lorenzo Cain would lead off with a double, then Hosmer ended up getting out, but he moved Cain over to third on the grounder. Hunter then came in to relieve Tillman, and Billy Butler came to the plate, and he hit a sac fly that would score Cain as he tagged up at third and came across home to make the score 5-1 Kansas City over Baltimore. Alex Gordon then got a single, but he was then picked off as he was taking too big of a lead off at first, as he was possibly a hit and run or a steal. But anyway, the top of the fifth came to a close. The Royals did put the 1 run on the board, so it was now 5-1 KC over Baltimore heading into the bottom of the fifth. And Nick Markakis would be the leadoff batter, and he hit a single. Then Diazza singled, so we had 2 on, no out for Jones. He hit into a fielder's choice, and he was out at first. And Markakis and Diazza were now both in scoring position on third and second, respectively. Nelson Cruz would then come to the plate, and he hit a double, and Diazza scored, and Jones moved to third, and it was now 5-2 Kansas City over Baltimore. Pierce then walked, and Hardy struck out. So Flaherty came to bat with 2 on and 2 out, and he hit a single, and that brought both Jones and Cruz in to score and put Pierce on third, and it was now 5-4 with the tying run on third base. So Hundley now came to the plate, and he ended up getting out, and that would bring the fifth to a close. So it was now a one-run ball game heading into the top of the sixth as Kansas City led Baltimore 5-4. Kevin Gausman then came in to pitch for Hunter, and he would get Perez to ground out. Infante came up, and he got a single, so it was 1 on 1 out for Moustakas, but he'd pop out, and then Escobar got out, and we were headed to the bottom of the sixth. Finnegan would come in to relieve Shields, and he walked Schoop, the first batter he saw. Markakis then got a single, so it was 2 on and no out. Then both runners ended up stealing. Schoop stole third, and Markakis stole second, so he had 2 runners in scoring position as Diazza came up to bat, and he hit a single. They would end up scoring Schoop. So it was now a tie ball game at 5-5. Herrera would then come in to pitch for Finnegan. Jones came to the plate, and he hit into a fielder's choice. Markakis was out at third. Diazza was safe at second, but then he ended up moving over to third on a throwing error by Moustakas. So now Nelson Cruz came up to bat, and he hit into a double play, and the sixth came to a close, but not before the Orioles managed to tie this game up, as it was now knotted up at 5 runs apiece heading into the top of the seventh. Gausman then walked Aoki, and then Dyson came in to pinch run, but he was caught stealing second, so it was 1 out for Cain, who struck out, so we had 2 outs, and Miller came in to relieve Gausman, and then Hosmer came up and hit a single, so Butler came up with 2 outs and 1 on, and he struck out, and we were headed to the bottom of the seventh with the game still knotted up at 5. Now Pierce would end up getting out, and then the next 2 batters, Hardy and Flaherty, struck out as Herrera set down the side in order. And so now after 7, it was still tied up at 5 runs apiece, heading into the top of the 8th. And then Gordon was ended up getting hit by a pitch to lead off the inning. Perez struck out, and then Infante fouled out, and Moustakas struck out to end the top half of the inning, stranding Gordon on base. So now we move to the bottom of the 8th, and Davis came in to pitch for Herrera, and he would set down the O's in order. He actually struck out the second batter of the inning, Schoop. So we were headed to the top of the 9th, still tied up at 5. Zach Britton came in to pitch for the Orioles as he was relieving Miller, and he walked the first batter he saw, Escobar, and then he walked Dyson, who had 2 walks to lead off the top of the 9th as there was 2 runners on, and then Cain walked, so now the bases were loaded off of walks. Hosmer came to the plate, but he hit into a fielder's choice, and Escobar was out at home, and the bases were still loaded now with 1 out as O'Day would come in to relieve Britton. And then Butler came to the plate with the bases juiced, and he ended up getting into a double play. So now we headed to the bottom of the 9th, as Wade Davis was still on the mound for the Royals, and he would set down the O's in order as he struck out Diazza, Jones, and Cruz as he came up super clutch to send this game into extra innings. So heading into extra innings with the score 5-5 in the top of the 10th, with Darren O'Day still on the mound for the O's. Alex Gordon came off the lead off the inning, and he hit a home run, and it was almost 400 feet, and that would break up the ties. It was now 6-5 Royals over the Orioles. Salvador Perez would then walk, and Omar Infante came to bat, and he struck out, and Matsus would now come in to relieve O'Day. And so Moustakas came up to the plate, and he hit a 2-run shot, almost 400 feet as well, and it was now 8-5 as the Royals had scored 3 runs here in the top of the 10th. Escobar got out and Dyson struck out, and we were now headed to the bottom of the 10th, but not before the Royals took a 3-run lead in this game. And so now we had Greg Holland on the mound for the Royals as he came out to close this one out. Pierce would end up getting out, and Hardy struck out. So now Flaherty came to bat with 2 outs in the bottom of the 10th, down by 3 runs, and he ended up getting a single. So now he was on base, and then Paredes ended up pinch hitting for Hundley, and he walks. So now we had 2 on, 2 out for Delmon Young, who would come in to pinch hit for Schoop. So Delmon Young, who had had success pinch hitting in the ALDS, now came up in the ALCS in the bottom of the 10th. and he hit a single, and that would score Ryan Flaherty, as it was now a 2-run ball game with the score 8-6 Kansas City over Baltimore. So now with 2 on, 2 out, Lowe would come in to pinch run for Young, and Markakis was at the plate, and he grounded out, and this game came to a close with the final score 8-6 as Greg Holland picks up the save, and the Royals make history with their 4th win in the postseason in extra innings. And they win this one, game 1 in the ALCS, to take the 1-game lead over the Orioles in this series. And going back to the note about the history that they made, the Red Sox had the record with the most postseason wins in extra innings from that 2004 postseason. That, of course, was in part due to when they were down 0-3 in the ALCS to the Yankees. They had won the ALDS Game 3 in extra innings against the Angels in Fenway to sweep the Angels, and then they won Games 4 and Game 5 against the Yankees in the ALCS in extra innings, so that was 3 for them. But the Royals now have won 4 extra inning games, and this is just Game 1 of the ALCS, as it has been quite the magical postseason for these Royals. And in this game, both pitchers, both starters struggled. James Shields was only out there for 5 innings, and he allowed 4 earned runs and 10 hits. He had 1 walk and 3 strikeouts. Tillman only lasted 4 1/3 innings. He let up 5 earned runs, 7 hits, 2 walks, and 3 strikeouts, as well as a home run. But as bad as the starting pitching was for both of these teams, the relievers were excellent, especially for the Royals, as Herrera and Davis both pitched 2 innings, and neither of them allowed any earned runs. Herrera had 2 strikeouts, and Davis had 4, including when he struck out the side in the bottom of the 9th to send it into extra innings. And then Greg Holland picked up the save and gave away Davis the win, as Greg Holland shut things out with the last inning that he pitched. He allowed 2 hits and an earned run, but he did get the strikeout. He did walk a batter, and he ended up getting the save. Of course, O'Day ends up getting the loss as he pitched the 1 inning, the top of the 10th, and he ended up letting up 2 earned runs and a hit. Of course, he had pitched part of the top of the 9th and into the 10th, and then Matsu's got the final 2 outs there in the top of the 10th, as he was actually ended up letting up an earned run as well. So, quite the exciting game in extra innings. And if we look at the plate for the Royals, Alex Gordon was 3 for 4 with 4 RBIs. As he came up clutch in this game for Kansas City. He had the 1 run. He did strike out once. Of course, he had a double, and he also had the home run. So he came up with a really big game. The home run there in the top of the 10th. Moustakas also had that home run in the top of the 10th as well, and that was his lone hit in this game. He was 1 for 5, and he had those 2 RBIs with that home run, and he actually came across the plate then too. He struck out once as well. Butler also had an RBI. He was 2 for 4. He did strike out once. Cain had a double. He was 2 for 3. And he came across the plate twice for 2 runs. He also walked twice and struck out once. And Escobar had an RBI. He was 1 for 5 with 1 run. For the Orioles, Markakis was 3 for 6. Diazzo was 2 for 5. Cruz was 2 for 5. He had an RBI. He also had a double. And Markakis had a double as well. Flaherty was 3 for 5 with 2 RBIs. He came across the plate once. He did strike out twice, though. In total, the Orioles struck out 10 times, and the Royals struck out 9 times. The final score here is Royals 8, Orioles 6, as Kansas City takes the 1-game lead in the ALCS with their 4th extra inning win in this postseason, as they make MLB history.